This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm pleased to welcome everyone to today's regular meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. For members of the public attending remotely, the agendas are available at hrrd.newyork.gov under board meetings. We ask that you please close other programs on your computer or phone, silence your cell phone, and mute your audio when not speaking. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for public comment. I'd like to call this meeting to order, which we just did, and we'll begin this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
I told everybody to turn their cell phones off, and I'm going to turn mine off. Excuse me.
That's the emergency.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, roll call, Mr. Lesson.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
First Vice Chair Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Alfred Candido.
Here.
Board members Albert Hayes.
Here.
Richard Byrd.
Here.
Timothy Reagan. And Nicole Allen.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here. Chief Engineer Robert Fulton.
Here. Chief
Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Rizzi.
Here.
Everybody's.
Thank you. We need a motion to revise today's meeting agenda. If you look at your agendas, you'll see letter E, and we are not going to be discussing that. So that is our revision of today's meeting. With that, I'd like a motion to accept the revised agenda.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. DeWitt.
Any further discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no guests, public comment. We only have Mr. Sullivan. Did you have anything?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll move on to the approval of the September 12th, 2023 regular board meeting minutes. Have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Byrd.
Additions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the report of our executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, you'll see my report appears on pages 9 and 10 in your board packet. Just a couple of things I'll note specifically. The retirement of our foreman at the Sacandaga Field Office, Dave Ioli, as I indicated to the board, has moved on into retirement. His service spanned 2 decades here at the regulating district, and we thank him for his service. I also want to note good news on the Indian Lake project. We have received finally approval from the state controller to approve the contract. Allowed Mr. Fulton just yesterday to give the contractor C.D. Perry the start work order. I want to thank Mr. Fulton for years of work bringing us to this point. Very important project, as the board knows much more than I. I also thank Stephanie Rizzi for her work in responding to a litany of requests from the Office of State Controller that was necessary for their approval of the contract. I just want to also note briefly, I'm sure Tim will address it during his report also, thank him for his great work working with the independent auditors, annual audit. The delivery of those items allowed us again to meet the deadline for reporting to the Public Authorities Information System, PARIS, and that's something we have done every year since Tim has been on board. It's a very tight deadline, 90 days after the close of the fiscal year, so congratulations on that as well. I want to note also, and this is something I think we'll discuss briefly if the board has questions during the board number of questions and discussion at the end of the meeting, but I sent to you all the letter that we received from Mike Tucker. You'll note my report. Met with him recently to discuss his frustration at the pace with which we've moved forward on a purchase of the Stillwater plant. Many reasons, as Mr. Leslie will articulate, that we're not in a position to recommend anything to the board yet, but certainly we can speak more about that at the end of the meeting. But I do want to thank Mr. Leslie for his work over the better part of a couple of years now, trying to get to a resolution through the various appraisals and negotiations with Mr. Tucker directly and his attorney. It continues to be a journey. So I'm sure Mr. Leslie will address that also in his remarks. I just want to note also, Mr. Reagan brought it up just before the start of the meeting. It's not often we can talk about Hawkinsville in a positive context, but we are out of the water there with substantial completion of the major work. After the meeting today, Hawkinsville, town of Boonville will certainly be on the way, or at least just a short side trip. Many of our trips home, I encourage the board, we certainly plan to stop at Mr. Fulton as well, to see the work that's been done under the board's leadership on that project.
John, I'm not sure I brought that up. I just want the record to be clear. I had no plans of bringing that up, so.
This might be my trickier.
So Rob, just, I had no plans.
I would add one caveat that you don't anticipate any business to be conducted at that site visit.
Yeah, if there are more than 4 members there, we certainly won't discuss conducting official business. But thought the board separately might like seeing that project in positive context. And finally, anytime we're here in the Black River area, we want to thank Kim Scott, our administrative officer, Megan Cole, who's upstairs and moves remotely. If you have a chance after the meeting and before you depart for Hawkinsville, if you so choose, and want to see the nerve center of the Black River area, it is just 1 floor up, and the work they do is amazing and very important. So thank you, Kim, and thank you, Megan. With that, I'll pause for any questions from us.
Any questions or comments from the Executive Director? Thank you very much, John. Move on to contracts and actions. The first one, A, resolution to approve Amendment 1 to contract 062016 with Arcadis of New York to perform engineering services in connection with the Old Forge and Six Lake Dam. Recommendation for remedial measures. Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution for this amendment is on page 11 of the packet. The amendment is needed to extend contract with Arcadis for the Old Forge and Six Lake Dam Rehabilitation Project design, which expired near the end of 2022. Engineering design work and the payment for Arcadis' engineering services has continued uninterrupted since the expiration of the contract, and Arcadis continues to make good progress as it advances towards a 90% design stage by the end of the first quarter of 2024. So staff recommends the board approve the amendment to extend the contract with Arcadis to December 31st, 2025.
Yeah, I'll just note that we did make one payment during the lapse period. It was for work that was completed and reviewed by Mr. Fulton, so the board's action here will cover that period of question.
We have a motion to approve the amendment.
I will.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Next is resolution approving a cash payout of unused annual sick leave and contribution to health insurance premiums to David Ioli upon retirement. Do you have a motion for that? Or do you want to speak to it first?
I'd be happy to do so, Mr. Chair, thank you. The resolution authorizing payment of Dave Ioli's accrued benefits begins on page 12 of your packet. The agreement with the regulating districts bargaining union stipulates certain payments upon retirement. Dave is entitled to the payout described in the resolution based on the terms of this agreement and based upon his time of hire. You may recall that one of the recommendations from the Inspector General report issued in April of 2021 was that we present the terms and calculations of such payouts to the board for their information and review. This is the third time we have followed this recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this resolution before you take action.
You know, I'm not used to that. I know government does this as far as payout for sick days, and also some allow vacation days to be accumulated to pay for stuff. But, I mean, you've got your benefits and everything in a fiscal year that you budget for and all that. I just don't understand why people carry so much liability over on something like sick days and vacation pay. I mean, I understand everybody does it. Where'd it come from? How did that all start and stuff?
So we have had a very, very long history and numerous collective bargaining agreements with the union that governs our interactions with roughly 60 or 70% of the staff here at the regulating district. As you might imagine, it's a very specific, detailed document that lays out not just compensation, but other elements of the work relationship over time. These provisions upon which this payout is based were mutually agreed upon through that collective bargaining process.
I understand all that, Tim. I
Yeah.
understand totally, it's contractual, all that, we have to pay. My question's more from a liability standpoint. Why would the state, why would all of us continue to do that over the long period of time? You know, typically when you've got a liability, you take it to your, you take it into the budget that you got, or you put money aside for it to cover that and stuff like that. Why would you want a big liability like that? Why would the state, why would everybody, other than it's from a standpoint of contractual and there's no getting out of it, but it seems like it just seems different to me that you'd want that type of liability long term.
Well, it's a liability that accrues over time as a result of as a result of the agreement. It is in the history of state and local government in the United States, accounting for and financially reporting what those liabilities are is a relatively new standard from the Government Accounting Standards Board over the last roughly 15 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at our balance sheet, as I'm sure all of you will do very dutifully in the coming days and weeks, now that the audit is completed, you'll see that the liability for other post-employment benefits is by far the largest liability that we carry. And there was a time when that did not get reported to boards or to lenders or to other interested parties. You would only report the expense, the annual expense that you would pay out for somebody who takes sick time or vacation or things like that. So as a result of this change in the standard over the years, we and other state governments, at least actuarially estimate that and are required, if we want to present statements consistent with generally accepted accounting principles, which we do, we have to present that, an estimate of that long-term liability, discounted, of course, into present value terms. I'm happy to answer any other questions that anybody has about this. We obviously would expect to be back in 20 years. I think there was some discussion of 20 years the next time somebody retires from the regulating district, so it might be a little bit of a hiatus between now and then. But, for those of us who will still be here in 20 years, we'll be back having this conversation again.
So anybody after 2006 would have to contribute to the health insurance.
So there is a range of different calculations that have changed over time as different bargaining agreements have been agreed upon and adopted by the board. That is one of the changes that one is relevant here, but has been supplanted by a newer one. So if you were hired after 2009, you pay a different amount for health insurance if you are a represented employee, and it is in the contract that what you pay as an employee continues as you enter into retirement.
Tim, thanks for pointing that out. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The long-term liability for all this that you said as far as total expense for us is one of the biggest expenses that you have
By far.
inside of going through there. Whether it's county or village or town, they all have the same type of long-term liabilities related to
If
different programs.
if they provide other post-employment benefits, which generally are health insurance, but could include some other things. Health insurance tends to be the big driver on this. If they do that, and they want to present financial statements under generally accepted accounting principles, they estimate and record and report this liability as we do.
Okay. And, can I ask for a motion to approve the cash payout?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Just a second.
Any further discussion on it? Again, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, resolution to amend the approved insurance policy proposal for policy year July 1st through June 30th, 24. Again, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution authorizing amendment of the insurance program begins on page 14 of your packet. You may recall that each June we ask the board to approve insurance resolutions so the regulating district can mitigate many of the risks it faces. The biggest elements of the insurance program are general liability and umbrella coverage, each of which have contained allowance for terrorism risk insurance. In this year's package, that component of the general liability and umbrella package was erroneously omitted from the cost. We asked the board for approval to rectify this error so the regulating district can obtain terrorism risk insurance coverage for its infrastructure.
Any questions?
What is stamping on there? So it's in the last sentence.
Yeah, so those are just, once a policy and coverage is finalized, is sort of the last act to
Oh,
make
okay.
sure that it's, legal and passes all of the laws and regulations covered.
Again, a motion to approve the insurance policy for July 1st through June 30th, 24.
We'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, resolution to approve a fee proposal and authorize the executive director to enter into contract C022023 with Gomez and Sullivan Engineers, DPC, to develop the final dam breach inundation mapping and the narrative of breach analysis for use in the Conklinville Dam EAP. Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my memorandum is on page 16. This is a continuation of and the last phase of work for a project which was started in 2008, following a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission request to develop dam breach analysis and inundation mapping for Conklinville Dam. And our submission of April 20th, 2021 to FERC was approved this past February. That submission was the final breach analysis for Conklinville, and Gomez and Sullivan Engineers has now provided a proposal to develop the final breach inundation mapping and narrative for the breach analysis for Conklinville Dam based on its breach analysis model that was accepted by FERC in February of this year. Gomez and Sullivan Engineers intends to complete the services outlined in its proposal for a fee of $44,400. Regulating district staff recommends acceptance of Gomez and Sullivan Engineers' proposal, seeks board acceptance of the recommendation, and seeks authorization to form a contract to complete the work, and seeks authorization for the executive director to execute an agreement in an amount not to exceed $44,400. Happy to answer any questions if you have.
Do you have any proposal, or what would actually, if they had a breach, would we lose Saratoga?
Well, the analysis indicated that, based on the assumptions for a breach width of the embankment, that you're looking at a breach flow in the neighborhood of 500,000, peak flow, 500,000 CFS out of the Conklinville Dam. And the breach inundation mapping, which extends consistent with FERC regulations, about 80 miles south of Albany. And that would be all considered the inundation area or area impacted by a breach if it were to occur at Conklinville. So it's an extensive amount of mapping as a result of the breach analysis and the area that would be impacted.
Helps explain the sense of urgency we both feel every time we meet with OGS and Bergman on the upcoming rehabilitation of Conklinville Dam. Because truly, failure is not an option.
Yeah, and this is a standard requirement for every structure. It's not at all related to or indicative of a poor condition or, an unsatisfactory condition. It's quite the opposite in the case of Conklinville. But it's the emergency action plan and the inundation mapping is just something that we need to have in the event of the worst case scenario.
Having learned how to pronounce inundation correctly, I ask for a motion to approve the proposal.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I'll second it.
any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we move to F, resolution authorizing the expenditure of up to $49,700 for the purchase of a replacement pickup truck in the Hudson River area. Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As indicated by this resolution, this is a replacement vehicle for 2003 Ford F-250, which we have endeavored to keep on the road through the great efforts of Mike Chase and others over the course of many years. Finally reached the point of diminishing returns and is now on its way to making razor blades and other things having been scrapped by the regulating district. This is a vehicle we use to transport tools and equipment and also personnel, especially during the summer months in conjunction with the shoreline erosion program. So with that, I'll pause for any questions to the board.
You didn't need a pickup truck to be able to take the dump trailer, did you?
No, well, no, we can haul the dump trailer with,
Just curious.
we have not been hauling anything with that pickup truck for a number of years. But Dump trailer can move other ways, but this is a vehicle that will have an extended cab, and so the whole crew can jump in.
Very good. I'll ask for a motion to accept the proposal to buy the truck.
I will make that motion. I'll second it.
Any further discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, our staff and committee reports. First, General Counsel, Mr. Leslie.
My report is on page 31 of the board packet. I'd note that there has been no movement with Erie Boulevard regarding the expired reservoir operating agreement at Conklinville, nor on the FERC order on the hearing addressing the January 2023 petitions filed by the regulating district and Erie. The Office of the Attorney General stands ready to appeal the June 15th order and the order on rehearing of those January petitions. Should an appeal be necessary, and also stands ready to commence an affirmative case seeking redress against Erie in the state and our federal court system. We have had some discussions with the Attorney General's office, especially their Claims Bureau, and they are basically beginning to prepare that affirmative case. And at the same time, it basically told us things look pretty good. If you need us to appeal, we will jump in. There has been little movement also with Stillwater Associates, who believe the regulating district should not buy the hydroelectric plant that Stillwater operates at the Stillwater Reservoir. The party's opinion on value remain nearly $500,000 apart. Stillwater has allowed the existing ground lease and water usage agreement to expire. Staff will continue to negotiate a defensible price for said plant, entertain any other potential buyer, and consider proposals for an extended term lease at the market rate determined in the appraisal. At this point, Stillwater is paying the rate for rent that they paid previously. They have not elected to enter into an extension of this agreement, and therefore have not negotiated to accept the lower rent that they could have. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll just note, we haven't received, since the contract expired, Stillwater does tend to pay late in the month. We haven't received the October check yet, but the agreement, I think, specifies, Counselor, that so long as from the period of expired agreement to a closing, so long as they pay rent, they continue to enjoy access to that plant and the ability to generate and sell, which I think in this case is just fine with us, because we think that it will take some time to get to an agreement. Whether the board wants to discuss that now or during board members' questions and comments, I think we could get a little more into our outreach to the New York Power Authority with help from the executive chamber to see if there's a partnership that could be achieved there, or some of the other legislative initiatives that we have initiated in order to be in a less unenviable position if we have to come into ownership of the plant. But also a recent conversation we've had with the Office of State Controller to talk about this potential sale and what they would need to see to approve such a sale, all of which is to say, I don't think we are close to being there yet. We are far apart on the price, and I think the key phrase in sort of the agreement is at the then appraised value. Stillwater Associates seizes upon that phrase to say that means at the original contract expiration, December 31st, 2021. But the contract has just expired because it was extended through Mr. Leslie's efforts, keeping all the terms and conditions in place. So it would be tough, I think, to say to in good conscience, the Office of State Controller, that we agree with sort of stopping the clock where they would like to stop the clock for purpose of evaluation. You'll also see in Mr. Tucker's letter to me and to the chair that I forwarded to the entire board, Mr. Tucker sort of recounts this discussion with the appraiser about when that date should be set. And what the regulating district said at every point, because this needs to be an independent appraisal, is you do it. We're not going to tell you what date to use. We're not going to tell you what number to use. If you're presented with information from Stillwater Associates or from us, you should apply it as, in your professional judgment, you see fit. I hope I'm sort of getting this pretty much right, Counselor. And so they did, the appraiser did then adjust the number based on that information from Stillwater Associates. And one of the things we've heard from State Controller is when you come to us, you've got to show us that you've reviewed the appraisal, meaning somebody here or somebody at another state agency that we can get assistance from, like perhaps the Power Authority, and that you can validate or agree with this number. Since we're not in a position to do that, we're really not in a position to advance a recommendation to the board. And I think we'll be looking to go back to Mr. Tucker, continue to negotiate. Certainly possible that this ends up in litigation, but that's not our hope. But we're not close, I think it's fair to say. And you'll see in Mr. Tucker's letter his frustration, which I understand. But we've got an obligation to the people of the state of New York. The board has a fiduciary obligation. We do have a contractual obligation. So all these things need to be weighed against one another. And at the end of the day, I believe we'll need to move forward with this in some way. But getting to the number, I think, is going to be the tricky part.
Now, the guy that we did this through is the third appraisal.
Yeah.
They had an appraisal, we had an appraisal. How do those appraisals, we don't take the same criteria that's just been agreed on with a third appraiser and go back to those two and say, now you take a look at it, and we don't do that, or?
So we followed, I think, and I'll keep running until Mr. Leslie with his long legs kicks me under the table, running the ball here, but we followed the spirit of the agreement. Each side would get an appraisal, and we try and reconcile those numbers. If they were close enough, they weren't close enough. So the agreement called for a third independent appraisal. This was all on a very aggressive timeline. The timeline that we achieved was not as aggressive as the one that the agreement called for, but we followed basically what it laid out. They had two valuation reports done. I don't think either one was really an appraisal.
They had two valuation reports, neither of which was an appraisal, each of which were indefensible. They were internally inconsistent and ultimately not utilized by the third entity that Stillwater Associates hired, who did ultimately conduct an appraisal.
Can I interrupt for 1 second,
Yep.
Counselor? Before that, he did review the work that we had done and the work that Stillwater Associates had done.
You're ahead of me.
I'm going to sit back and
So-
let you work.
So basically, corporate valuation advisors and the Schwartz Heslin Group both put out these valuation reports. They then advanced those valuation reports to us as suggestion that the value that Stillwater was advancing was relevant. Stillwater then hired Gar Associates, who then used those two valuation reports and some other information to come up with an appraisal for Stillwater Associates. We, at that time, anticipating the end of the extended term of the agreement, also hired an appraiser. Our appraiser came up with a valuation that was far divergent from the appraisal that Gar came up with. At that point, because those two appraisals were more than 15% apart, the parties, us and Stillwater, got together, and that's where John was going to, is the third appraiser was hired. That appraiser first looked at our appraisal and basically said, yeah, it's got some shortcomings, but the valuation is basically sound. And looked at the three documents that Stillwater put together and said, basically, none of those valuations are defensible. And rather than go back to each of those entities and ask for updates, I, the third appraiser, would recommend that the parties go forward with a new appraisal conducted by me, which the parties agreed to do, again, in anticipation of the end of the agreement. As the agreement continued to be extended, we wanted to be in a position where we had a relevant appraisal at the expiration of the agreement. The agreement basically expired September 30th of 2023. We now have a valuation that is based coming up on 2 years ago. OSC has said to us among the things that they want to see is a valuation that is temporally closer to the expiration of the agreement. Whether the April 2023 recitation of what the value was on December 31st of 2021 is what OSC wants to see, or whether they want to see a valuation based on the value of the plant at the expiration of the agreement on September 30th of 2023, we're still not sure. We didn't get that from OSC. But those questions we won't get answered until we can produce an internal expert who can review the appraisal and determine its sufficiency, or meet with an agent outside of our agency, such as an expert at NYPA, New York Power Authority, who can look at the appraisal and say, yes, the state's getting value, or no, the state's not getting value. Am I?
Yeah, no, and the only other thing I'll mention is, they, in our meeting, they sort of compared us to the Thruway Authority in one respect. We go, after years of sort of not sending anything to the controller, we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. We send them everything. And that goes above and beyond what a number of other public authorities, really the rest of the public authorities in New York State do, where you will submit a report to the Office of State Controller within 30 days of the start of your fiscal year,
Yes.
listing every contract that you might send them that fits in certain categories, one of which is over $1 million. So raising the possibility is, if you could come to a purchase price that's under $1 million, and if you revised your procurement policy to mirror what the other public authorities in New York State do, you might not need to send us this at all and for review. So there's, suffice to say, we're still processing a lot of what we heard from Office of State Controller. We invite you, I think, to review Mr. Tucker's letter and probably have a good deal more discussion on this issue in November, but of course, we're open to questions and discussion at any time.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have my thoughts on Mr. Tucker's letter.
I understand.
Reading all that and stuff, and so it sounds like they do not want Stillwater, or they don't want the power plant Stillwater. They want to get rid of it.
They have said in this letter, notwithstanding the talk a couple of years ago that we might come to a new agreement, or that they may have a third-party purchaser of the plant. Mr. Tucker has made it clear verbally to me in our last conversation, and certainly in this letter, that they want the regulating district to move forward with the purchase of the plant.
And I don't understand the cost per kilowatt for hydro. I mean, hydro used to be 2 cents when I got involved. I don't know what the heck it is now, but this is 25 years ago. I'm sure it's gone up just like anything else, but actual cost, not what they're selling it for, but actual cost. I don't know what wind is, and I don't know what solar is, but my only question on that, is this something that we're gonna see in all of our power dams as other sources come on and are getting, I'm sure there's something coming back in, just like what there was for non-utility co-generators 30 years ago to build a power plant. It was subsidized by the state. So, I mean, is this just a continuation of what we're gonna see?
I think generally what you're seeing is a lot of subsidies out there at the state and federal level for wind and solar. What you're hearing a lot from companies in the hydroelectric power space is they're not getting similar subsidies for plants that are reaching really their useful life. And so those upgrades are expensive. And at this point, they're, again, I am just repeating what Now, I'm not making this statement, but what we're hearing from hydroelectric power producers is they are not getting comparable subsidies, and it puts them at a competitive disadvantage. I don't think, for instance, this same desire to get out of sort of antiquated plants, especially smaller plants, this one happens to be exempt, so for exemption, is the same thing you're seeing with larger corporations, like, for instance, Brookfield Renewable, which Tim could cite, I think, from memory, their last earnings statement. They're doing really well, and they are buyers right now. They are looking for more plants. Whether they're looking for a plant in Stillwater or not remains to be seen. But I think this is unique to, for whatever reason, this plant, how it's structured, the partnership that runs the plant. I don't think generally we'll see this in our world anyway, with the regulating district facilities play out similarly in other areas.
And the value, it sounds like the value is really based off from energy that's gonna be produced over the next 20 years.
Well, one of the things the appraiser did take into account is the existing power purchase agreement, which was originally signed with Niagara Mohawk, which survives, and it's based on not a date certain, but rather generation over many years. You can extrapolate out, and I think the thought is there are 7 years or so remaining. You guys want to?
So there's a rate which escalates based on total kilowatts generated. There is an end date, I think it is December 31st of 2029. The revision to the appraisal took into account that escalating value to some extent. We believe that there is another calculation to be made. One of the things that Mr. Tucker says in his letter is that the appraiser already has evaluated that in his professional judgment. I'm not confident that that is accurate. I don't think the appraiser has taken into account the comments that we arrived at when the appraiser produced his April 20th, I think, appraisal. But that purchase power agreement, you're exactly right. What is this thing going to be producing over the next 20 years? Right now, we know exactly what it's going to be producing over the next 7 years, 6 years at this point. But beyond that, nobody knows what it's going to be producing. So that is a major component of the valuation of the plant. In a perfect world, Mr. Tucker would continue to operate the plant through the end of that power purchase agreement. And from that point forward, we would have a much better understanding of what the rate would be and what how we would structure a deal to.
And the plant's functionality.
And the plant's functionality at that
age, nearly 50.
Right.
Hydro's, again, with hydro, minus all the kickbacks or anything, hydro's gotta be the cheapest power out there of going forward.
Well, we're out spending a ton of money at Conklingville. I mean, it is cheap if somebody else is paying the bills, but we're maintaining Stillwater Reservoir. We're maintaining the Stillwater Dam.
Yeah, but we're doing a lot of that for flood control. The electric is the second part of it, of going forward. Is the electric is the byproduct coming off from that. And so if you can cut out all the subsidies for solar and wind, because all you have to do is on your way back go down the number 4 road going in, number 3 road going into Loudville. Look at what's been built and the size of their office that they've got up there and stuff like that, Brookfield. It's huge. And you just look at all the infrastructure that went in there and stuff going down through there. And so you gotta figure it's gotta be subsidies, because again, I I can't imagine anything, understand wind's cheap, but you're putting up a hell of a big cost for a wind tower that went up through there. They talked about the numbers down in Lewis County that went in there and stuff with it. So it seems like we're justifying things to shut off our cheapest form of power. Not justifying, we're subsidizing.
Well, relative to Brookfield, we're subsidizing them to the tune of $2.3 million a year.
Even a bigger one. Well, all right, I'm just,
I don't want to cut this out. Is there any other comments?
No.
Thank you guys very much for.
Good luck, Colin.
Next, our Director of Administration Services, Mr. Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is found on page 233. During the reporting period, I performed the quarterly internal compliance audit at the Sacramento field office. Specifically, new permit application transactions were reviewed for accuracy, proper procedures are in place and being followed, and the audit findings have been documented. We are once again in the access permit renewal process. We have made a few minor revisions to the application form. They have been sent to CNY Business MWBE for revision. They're working on a draft. Once we get that, we'll contact IMC, also an MWBE business, and we should be good to go with this year's renewal forms. Finally, on pages 34 to 36, you will find the contract status reports. They are there for your review and are included in each pad to satisfy the public authority reporting requirement. If you have any questions, if not, that completes my report.
Any questions?
Yes. What happens with drugs like smoking pot? Do you test for that? But it's now legal in the state.
Yes, yes, because I oversee the CDL program that you're mentioning, yes. Our drivers who are CDL licensed are subject to drug and alcohol testing randomly. And because CDL program falls under federal law, which is still illegal to be on smoking pot and be tested for it, drivers still test for it, yes.
Thank you.
We have an independent testing agency that goes and
Yes,
does
we
that for us.
contract through BOCES, and they send somebody out randomly. When we have a new hire, they get tested, and then randomly, one of our drivers will be tested.
But we don't have any control over when that happens. Right.
No, it's completely random. They will call me a day or possibly a week before someone gets tested, tell me who it is, and then morning of the test, that person is notified that to expect the test.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Minichi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the CFO report on page 37 of your packet. I'll just extend some of the comments that our Executive Director made with respect to the audit recently completed. I know you join me as well in thanking my colleagues, Kim Scott, who's with us in the room, and Anna Tracy, as well as the work of our independent auditors at Caleros Robinson for successfully completing the financial statement audit within the 90-day statutory requirement. I'm also happy to report that the auditor's opinion is unmodified, which is a technical term for auditors, loosely translated into plain English is clean, and that applies to both the financial information as well as the regulating district's internal controls. Let me just say a few words about the top line results of the audit. Regulating district generated net revenue in the July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023 period of $2.6 million. The regulating district's net position, while still a negative 2.2 million, is greatly improved from when it was a negative 10.5 million just 4 years ago. And as we have been reporting to you each month, the regulating district's cash position improved by more than 2.4 million over the balance 1 year ago. The lead partner on the audit, Nora Galeros, will provide much more detail when she shares the auditor's findings with the audit committee on November 7th at our next meeting. And if you desire to get a head start on all of this, I know all of you will want to do, you can find the audit on the reports page of the regulating district website. Let me pause here and offer to answer any questions that you might have about this or any other aspect of the regulating district's finances.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Quinn.
Thank you.
Next is our chief engineer, Mr. Pope.
Chairman, report begins on page 59. Across all of our watersheds, the reservoirs saw below average precipitation, 30 to 60% in the Hudson River area, and 23 to 39% in the Black River area. The result of that is, as demonstrated by the graphs provided, we tracked right along our target for splitting our target in historic average in some cases, but as typical with even September in the Fulton chain, we're right at our target elevation. And afforded the opportunity at Stillwater Reservoir, as again demonstrated by that graph on my report, page 8, that we were able to bring the reservoir down below the target elevation, just slightly below the target elevation at the end of the month. And much better position than sitting in just a month and a half earlier.
2 to 5 inches of rain over the weekend.
Yes, and then of course more recently, we haven't seen some rain, but the reservoirs haven't been drawn down, or in the case of Old Forge and Six Lake, it really wasn't that much precipitation. We were slightly drawn down and recovered some of that drawdown, but are now officially beginning our drawdown in the Fulton chain of lakes, having made increased release starting yesterday. We'll hopefully be tracking along that target line throughout the rest of the fall and winter at those locations. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much, sir. Board member questions and comments. Just want to make one. Some of you may have noticed that we did not bring up the Bresney issue. And I thought it would be better for us to table it till next month. I didn't want to look like we went out of town and made a decision.
Mr. Bresney has joined us.
Oh, he's here. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I can push it off to next month.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't see you come in.
I did not see him come in.
I apologize.
Next month is fine.
I just didn't want to do it if you weren't able to be here, but you're here. So,
Next month works fine for me.
all right, I thought it would look like, oh, we went out of town and made a decision.
Oh, he's here, Mr. Chairman.
What?
He is here.
Yeah, I know. Well, what's the board want to do? Do we want to discuss this or do we want to wait till next month? And I apologize for not seeing you.
No problem. Kind of stuck in.
What is the wishes of the board?
Is there any new information from last time?
We did meet on site, Mr.
Okay, so we're opening up for discussion.
I don't know, I'm not saying, I'm not saying to, I don't care if we wait till next month.
It's up to the board here.
You want to canvass the members, Mr. Chairman, this is what you want to do?
At this point, he's here, you guys are
Yeah,
here.
we're here.
And I don't know that there's any new information forthcoming that we're waiting on.
Okay. I open it up for discussion. I think I'd like to put a motion on the table to accept his proposal, which we can either vote up or vote down. But we'll get a motion on the table. Does that work?
Can I show you what my proposal is?
Sure. Please do.
I got hard copies, or I can email a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, let me just put it on the board. You want to do that?
We can't, this is not our equipment, Mr. Bresney, so if you have copies, you can hand out individually.
Maybe. I
Actually,
brought 11. Let's see how far. You need one?
I don't.
You do
did you have one for them?
Hey, if I can.
Board members, I'll bring me.
He should have.
Board members already.
Thank you.
All right.
Share with me.
Why don't we just go to page
Yeah.
3. So on page 3, what I'm offering up to do here is, if you look at there's 2 walls shown here. The one on the right is the one at 377 that's been accepted, it's 31 feet wide. Last time there was a discussion about the width of the walls, and I didn't have the numbers. The accepted wall is 31 feet. The wall that these folks want to remove is currently 40 feet. So what I'm proposing is to pull both ends of the 379 wall in by 5 feet. That would make it 30 feet wide, which would be coincident or actually a bit shorter than the accepted wall. Same height, same everything else. So that does 3 things really. A, it shortens the width and make it the same as the accepted wall. B, it makes it smaller than the 200 square foot trigger for APA review. It takes it down to 170 square feet, so it's significantly below the 200 square feet. And the other thing it does is exposes two groundwater drain lines and E10, which seem to be offensive as well. And so I put, there were existing drain lines that go into the foundation of the house. We put 4-foot extensions on them to bring them out the bottom of the wall. I put them back the way they were. They've just been drizzling down the bank, and these things drizzle, they don't run any water. So that's what I propose to do, is bring in both sides by 5 feet. That'll make the wall smaller than the APA regulations, smaller than the one next door has been accepted. Put the drain lines back to where get rid of the extensions. And I think that's all the offensive stuff. It also, if we go back to, it also meets all the, let me see what page you want to go to. If we go to page 14, I know there's folks that have hung up on the violating the permit. So the permitted base kind of retaining wall is not permissible on the lands of New York State, which I have yet to find anybody can give me find me a document that supports that. However, we do have the APA regulation on the left that talks about minor activities not considered new land use development and do not require agency 814 review. That would be construction of a retaining wall less than 200 square feet. So the modifications would take it down to 100 square feet, so it would be underneath that. Right now it's at approximately 220. That's on my land, but I guess it's gray whether my land is, I don't know how that goes, but if we can get it under 170, then that takes the gray out of it. And then the DEC regulations for type 2 actions that don't require review is maintenance or repair involving no substantial changes. Well, I didn't make any substantial changes. Landscaping is the same. Used the same rocks, added some more rocks, and made the existing wall, recreate the existing wall. Number 2, replacement, rehab, or reconstruction of a structure in kind. If we look at, I've got a picture someplace here. If you look at page 2, you can see the original wall on the left, and on top left, and the rebuilt wall on the bottom right. So it is the same footprint. We do use the same rocks. So we incorporated the original rocks into the rebuild and added some rocks. If you study that picture, you can actually see some of the old rocks and the new rocks. So it was a rebuilding kind. It was dry laid stone, and that's also in this APA regulation. Says 200 square foot size made of dry laid stone. So it's dry laid stone. And then the DEC regulation on page 14 says maintenance of existing landscaping. And I believe that it says existing landscaping. So I think I meet the DEC guidelines, I meet the APA guidelines. I understand this, the concern of violating a permit, although, like I say, we did have, I thought, a verbal agreement to do a river rock repair. I was confused that a river rock repair and a river rock wall to me meant repairing the river rock wall. And details or drawings or sketches, instructions provided, other than it's okay to repair that wall. So that's what I went with. So I've never intended to violate I thought they were okay with the permit. It was my intention to violate the permit. Again, this whole job was, my cars were face up the whole time. I applied for a permit, we had a meeting, we had a time frame, we did it during the week, during the day, we didn't do it on weekends and nights or holidays. So everybody knew we were there. There was somebody that came to the site in the middle of the job. It's not clear why that individual was there. Had a clipboard in his hand, I found out, wrote on the clipboard and left and never talked to anybody. I never got a report from that. So there was no indication that I was off road. So I thought we were going down the right road. I didn't think I was on compliance. And now as we look at the APA guidelines and DC guidelines, I believe I'm not in, and I believe I am in compliance with those. And I would think that they also provide for example, there's rights to do things as long as they're within those guidelines. So that's where I'm from now. I met with Mr. Callahan. We couldn't seem to come to an agreement. I have information on what he's suggesting in here. If you want to talk about that first, and I can talk about it later. You want to talk about that or no?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Certainly here for any questions the members may have.
Well, I think that after we met with you, no one in the field office said that they were at the site looking at the wall. And later on, I started thinking about this at home. And I think the person from the field office was looking at riprap, putting riprap at the shore. And that's what he was in there for. He had nothing to do with the wall. He was just looking at riprap.
We just haven't been able to identify that individual. We did, Mr. Bresney's contractors were on site for the last site visit that you attended, Mr. DeWitt, and one of the contractors described the person who had been on site as looking a little bit like Dan, but younger, as Dan was on site with Danielle. And I asked, well, was it Dan? And they said, no, somebody else, but it looked like Dan. And I just have a hard time identifying who else works for us that looks like Dan. It wasn't Dan or Danielle, it wasn't the permit department. It is possible, and that was our theory as well, that it might have been Tom Baker looking at the riprap work, but I suggested that to Mr. Bresney. He indicated it wasn't Tom Baker, but maybe it's a mystery that will remain unsolved.
But we're not sure it was even somebody from the Hutchins or Black River.
The contractors said that they definitely saw a state truck, and they said that it was our logo on the truck.
Okay.
So I take them at their word. I just don't know, based on the description, from both Mr. Bresney and his contractor, who that person could be.
Well,
It wasn't me. I don't look like Dan. I'd love to look like Dan, but we just don't know who it was. We don't have anybody fitting that
the
description.
compromise that he just suggests, is that new information?
That's slightly new in terms of cutting back the drainage pipes, from his last, but he still intends to keep, what would you say, Mr. Bresney, 80% of that wall in place?
About 2/3. I mean, it's 40 feet wide pump, and I would drop it down to 30 feet wide, so we'd take 25% out of it. And that, once again, that would be now smaller than the size of the adjacent wall that's been accepted.
Yeah, and I just, if I may, just one more comment. Mr. Bresney uses the term, the wall that's been accepted or accepted wall. I think what he refers to there is in my adjudication of the appeal, after Mr. Fulton denied his appeal initially, I suggested a compromise where that wall might be allowed to remain in place. So this is now, Mr. Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, this is before the board, the entire encroachment. My recommendation to the board would still be to allow the wall to the south to remain, but that's up to the board. So the board has not accepted one wall and denied the other. It's in your hands.
Okay, well, I think what we should do is.
Just the acceptable length of 31 feet. That is where you made the exception.
No, I think
Is that the
what
picture?
Mr. Bresney's talking about the APA requirement.
No, I'm looking at this picture right here.
Okay.
They got this, so this picture right here, That says acceptable length.
So what I suggested in my letter when I ruled on Mr. Bresney's appeal, that wall be allowed to remain in place.
Okay, so-
Accepted length is not a term I used in that letter, but I
Yeah.
did say that wall might.
Okay, so that one can stay, but the one right next to
Well,
it.
again, that's where I just want to make it clear, that's my recommendation to the board, but this matter, the
But that
entire
was-
encroachment is before the board.
That was based on some give and take of trying to make something work.
It was my attempt, and it was based on review of the images, that wall was in good repair, the other one was in disrepair, and I went back to the board's original seeker where maintaining the natural contour. I'll tell you, this is a point on which Mr. Bresney and I sort of disagree in terms of the natural, and I appreciate, his position on it, but I think you captured it correctly, Tim. My attempt when the appeal was before me was to come at this with a solution, to be empathetic in some respects, to give him benefit of the doubt in some respects, to try and come, a resolution.
So basically, both walls are on state property.
They're both wrong.
Yes.
So I'm there, I found that part. Now, the hybrid permit on page 14, where it has regulations, work permit compliance of going through. So as we keep talking about that, we interpret them totally different when we're looking at these walls?
So there's two different issues here. One is if the APA were to determine this to be new land use and development, we, the regulating district, would need to be a co-applicant on the APA permit to allow whatever APA ultimately allows. The board has previously pronounced for staff that if the project is not a public project with a public purpose, that staff should get involved. The board should not be involved, and therefore we would forestall APA's review because we wouldn't be an applicant. The district wouldn't be an applicant. The flip side of that, the DEC side, is staff should look at DEC's type 2 list, determine whether a particular item might be included in DEC's type 2 list, and also look at the type 2 list that the regulating district put together to see if the proposed action might be type 2 under our regulations. Our regulations, I think, limit a wall to 18 inches. And while not artful, I think that's what the permitting staff had in mind when they said walls are not permitted on state lands. It's not that walls aren't permitted on state lands. Walls are only permitted without environmental review under certain circumstances. That distinction was not properly articulated in the initial ruling, but it still holds. That's the principle that we're under.
Okay, well, I think what we should do is get a motion on the table to accept and then have further discussion and bring it to a vote, yes or no?
Should we talk about what Mr. Callahan is suggesting?
When we get it on the table.
Okay,
Unless you want us to just, that's what I'm proposing.
it's up to you.
So the motion is to accept Mr. Bresney's proposal.
Yeah, we
As
can
it
vote it
is.
down, or if the board sees fit. Does that work, or you're the legal guy, does that?
So, yeah, if you want to resolve the permit appeal by accepting the proposal by the appellant, Mr. Bresney, yeah, you could
Is
do
that the
that.
proper way to do it?
If you reject his proposal, you will still have before you the appeal, and you will have to basically make a motion to accept or reject his appeal.
Well, so that should be the motion.
Well, they're two separate issues, right? If you want to uphold staff's determination, then a simple motion to uphold staff's determination ends the appeal. That's the final decision of the board. And at that point, Mr. Bresney can take whatever actions through the courts he deems necessary,
Okay, so it's,
Depending on how the vote goes.
depending on how the vote goes. Good point. I don't want to presage what
All right,
the
so-
board's going to say.
we need a motion to accept the appeal or reject the appeal. Accept the appeal. instead.
Either of those two motions could go first. If you want to allow Mr. Bresney to let the wall stay, then accept a motion on the table to accept Mr. Bresney's proposal, vote on it. If that is approved, then the appeal is done. If you don't want to allow Mr. Bresney's wall to stay, then you could still go through that same process, put a motion on the table to accept his proposal. If the board were to vote that down, then put a motion on the table to uphold staff's determination. If that is voted up, then we're done.
Yeah, and if, not, Counselor, Mr. Bresney's made a presentation, the board has it, probably simpler because, P implies Q here to some extent to go forward as the chair initially suggested with a motion to accept Mr. Bresney's proposal.
Yes,
Start there.
that is the simplest way to go forward.
Okay,
Okay, I want to make sure I got this right, you guys, so I'm sorry, I'm
Do you-
confused.
Do you want a motion and a second?
yeah,
discussion?
let's get a motion on the
Okay, then
table.
we can talk about that, okay.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept his appeal. Mr. Bresney's appeal.
Right way to word that?
You want to make a motion, Mr. Byrd is making a motion to accept Mr. Bresney's proposed resolution of the
His appeal.
violation.
Right.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, now I open the floor to discussion.
Okay. Sorry. Are we talking about 377 or are we talking about 379?
So,
I mean, because how do you not do both?
so Mr. Bresney has proposed modifying the, I've got to get to the right address here. He's proposing modifying
Just talking
the
about-
wall at 379 South Shore Road.
379.
He's not talking about modifying the wall
I,
at 377 South Shore.
I got that, you guys, but if one's wrong,
Our position, both were constructed in violation of the work permit. My adjudication of the appeal, Mr. Fulton upheld that determination. When it got to my point, I suggested he needed to keep the wall at 377 South Shore Road in place because it did not alter, in my judgment, the pre-existing condition or appearance, which in the board's 1980 seeker determination was an important factor. And I, again, in my own judgment, Bresney would disagree, I think, on this. He altered the appearance of the state land at 379 South Shore Road to an extent that we would not allow that wall to remain in place. Subsequently, I suggested to him as a further concession that he be allowed to keep the upper wall, which if not exactly 18 inches, was close enough, again, in my judgment, my opinion, to the 18 inches specified by the board in 1980 to be consistent with the spirit of its secret determination, and suggested that the lower wall be removed with additional material added to kind of create a slope down from that upper wall. At our last meeting with Mr. DeWitt, I further proposed that the amount of material I had previously suggested be added to facilitate that some way be doubled to 10 cubic yards. And I also suggested as a further concession that he be able to leave those drain pipe extensions in place. That today is where I am in terms of my position, my recommendation. And so I hope that answers your question.
So I want to get this clarified. I want to make sure I got it right, you guys, so I'm sorry, because I don't quite understand. But what we're saying is 377 is going to stay as is, but 379, when I look at the picture right above it, from a standpoint of looking at the wall, we're saying that can't stay the way it is because the wall is quite a bit different than what it was.
I think the motion on the table would leave most of it in place, maybe 2/3. That's Mr. Bresney's proposal to the board,
Okay.
inconsistent with my recommendation.
Inconsistent.
Inconsistent. Okay.
If that answers you.
Sort of.
Well, at least I know what I'm voting on.
My concerns in these issues are always the precedent we set. And that bothers me, like if we, the next time somebody violates, and backing up our staff. I think it's important too, but I don't have a vote in this.
I think.
Yes, you do have a vote on this.
Do I? Oh, okay. I thought it was from the chair.
You're a voting member of the board.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Allen may have been attempting to activate her microphone.
Ms. Allen?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Okay, we thought you might be weighing in.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So my only thought was that if I'm understanding this correctly, it's being reduced to below the 170 square feet. Is that what is being proposed?
Yes.
So my thought is with the other one being accepted, that this would be very similar in nature then in being able to be kind of on the same scale with the reduced size and scale of it. I don't see what it looks like. I don't have those images to be able to draw that same conclusion, but that's my feeling based upon the other one being approved or recommended for approval.
Anything else?
I think that would be right, just looking at it, I'm not trying to, but looking at it, I think that your assumption there would be correct. They'd be very similar, wouldn't everybody agree? That if that was dropped down in length and those pipes taken out, the two would look similar, or no?
I don't know if you guys will be able to see this or not.
Let me get this right.
Come closer, come closer, a little bit more.
Correct.
So are we taking the height off of it and then it's the reduced is where below where that red is?
That just indicates the proposed length.
That's the length.
The length.
The part that would come off would be, right from there where my pen is, and the same on the other side over here.
Higher.
Sorry.
Okay, they're good. Yep.
Right there would come out.
Everything in the middle would remain.
Everything in the middle would remain.
So the height of the lower wall remains, and that differs from John, from your recommendation. Your recommendation would be that the entire lower wall would have to be disassembled, and then that's where the hard fill would create a gradual slope?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Candido.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear on that.
It could be, it doesn't need to be.
Okay, is there anything else?
I'd just like to table this, make a motion to table this for the next meeting so everybody can understand what's going on, then we can settle it then. And can we start off with it so we can get it done? Is that acceptable to do in the next meeting?
Put it on the agenda?
Item?
Then we can put it on the agenda for next
You
meeting.
made the proposal, we have to vote on it, so. Proposal to table.
He was agreeable to table that until next meeting.
But there's been a
Motion and a second. So it's open for discussion. Before a vote, we have a member who has made a motion to table. And the question is whether that motion to table has been seconded.
I want to just add something to it, Al, if I can. Can we add, I would like to know why are we not allowing it? What in our bylaws or the regulations or whatever, what part of it and stuff says that this is why we need to deny this?
I just go back to our 1980 seeker determination and the fact that it's a type 2 action and that we would not, because we would not allow it, we would not initiate a jurisdictional inquiry with APA. I can provide the board.
So what are our guidelines then? What would be our guide? So all over again, what would be our guidelines?
If our staff had asked me about this at the first instance, what I would have recommended is, first, we determine if the project is a type 2 action under seeker regs, looking at DEC and looking at our own regs. At that point, if we determine that it is, make a jurisdictional inquiry of any other agency that may have permitting authority, in this place, potentially APA, determine whether or not APA has any interest. Our staff does this enough that they do that analysis in 10 seconds. They know what we would allow as a type 2 action, and they know what APA would allow and not allow.
Okay, so, but in the proposal, or in the thing that we're talking about right now, I guess the thing I wanna get to, this is where my stumbling block is and stuff. With the APA and the DEC, as you take a look at those two things, and what's being proposed as far as the cutbacks in the wall, does this satisfy what needs to be required? That's where I'm lost, you guys,
So
on this going forward.
if the proposal,
And if not, why? What supersedes these two things of going through there? Where is it in writing that supersedes and says, this is what it is?
if the proposal is below those thresholds, and it could be characterized as a type 2 action for DEC, and could be characterized as a type 2 action for the district, then the district could, on its own, determine that there is no impact on the environment and allow the jurisdictional inquiry to APA to go forward. Find out from APA that they are not interested, they don't care, and therefore we could issue or deny the permit. If it is over those thresholds, we could determine that it is not a type 2 action under seeker. We determine it is not a type 1 action under seeker. It's not the division, it's not the creation of a new subdivision. It's not the creation of a new dam. It's just a retaining wall, which would make it an unlisted action under our own rules, under seeker for the district. We would then conduct an environmental review, probably have him fill out a short form environmental impact statement or short form environmental assessment form or a long form environmental assessment form. Determine what the potential impacts would be, make a determination that those impacts are either acceptable or not acceptable, and move forward. In this case, he's bringing the proposal below the thresholds, which would allow the board to determine that it is a type 2 action under our rules, and it is potentially something that the board wants to accept. We, sitting here, have not made an inquiry of APA regarding the reduced footprint of the wall, but our staff previously made an inquiry of APA and determined that the larger footprint of the wall wasn't going forward, I guess, is the best way to put it.
We didn't do a jurisdictional inquiry because we weren't approving.
We weren't approving it. So, you know, we don't right now have our own staff's jurisdictional inquiry to APA and a response to that inquiry based on the reduced footprint. That said, is there a large risk that APA cares? They haven't been out yet. They also come out and look at these things, and they haven't said anything about it. So I don't know that it's a big lift to accept the proposal.
So I guess I'm taking all that I just told you, other than let's table it out.
I need a second to the motion to
I
table.
will, I'll second it.
And you might want a roll call vote on that, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would suggest
Okay.
To table.
a roll call vote on the motion.
Would it help if I withdrew my motion?
No,
Okay.
you're good. We have to table a motion, so. Okay, roll call vote, Mr.
Okay, Mr. Franklin,
Aye to table, yeah. Right, that's what I voted.
Mr. Rigg,
Table.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes, table.
Mr. Candido,
Yes, table.
Ms. Allen,
Yes, table.
Mr. Hayes,
Table.
and Mr. DeWitt is a no. Okay. So 6-1, the motion to table passes. And the decision will be to take this up at the November meeting, which is likely to be held
7th, in Mayfield,
in April.
11/7.
The agenda.
We will place that on the agenda for the November meeting. I'd ask Mr. Bresney, do you have an electronic copy of what you handed out today?
Yep.
That I can circulate to our 2 board members who are not here in the room today? Great.
Okay, any other board member comments or questions? Then I need a resolution for our next board meeting, which is 11/7 in Mayfield, in SFO, Mayfield.
Make that motion.
Second,
Mr. Hayes, Mr. DeWitt.
motion to adjourn, or I'm sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adjourn.
I'll make that.
Second,
Second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
28.
Pause for, we hear the meeting's not being recorded?